Good morning. Coming to you Friday from a hotel in Sydney. I'm currently sitting in front of a light that keeps flickering, so my apologies up front and in advance if that gets rather distracting and irritating for this 15-minute negotiation nugget that I'm doing this week. Doing my best to keep myself well lit for the video, but there we go. Apologies, it's gone off. Okay, so in this negotiation nugget, I want to talk about why internal negotiations are more challenging than external negotiations. Too often, I come across businesses in negotiation training where the focus is very much on how do we maximize our effectiveness through our skills development to extract more from the negotiations that we have with external counterparties. However, the biggest challenge I find most of those individuals and teams have when it comes to negotiation isn't the external landscape, it's the internal landscape within their business. Now, the mistake that many businesses and individuals make when it comes to internal negotiations is assuming that because you all work for the same company, that your colleagues will lean in and pull in the same direction that you're pulling in. Now, yesterday I had the privilege of being with a great team, part of a global business. Now, ANZ focused business, but head office in the US. So a lot of centralization of services and supports, and therefore mandates will come from the corporate office in the US to the regional office here in Australia and New Zealand, and giving directives on essentially global initiatives and things for the team to focus their energy on. Now, when we're in that environment where we've got a centralized business that's global and there's certain mandates that come from the corporate office to the regional markets, there is very much potential for conflict. One, because the corporate office is trying to do the right thing by the wider global business and creating initiatives, projects to support the overall landscape of the total business, which may not be neatly and snugly fitting for the regional markets and the challenges that each of the regional sub-markets may be facing. Now, when we get into therefore internal negotiations, right from the off, we've potentially got miscommunication around objectives, where the North Star is for the business, why we're doing what we're doing, and why the mandates from the centre are requesting certain projects or initiatives to be activated in service of the business results. Now, when it comes to internal negotiations and why they're so much harder and more challenging than external ones is one of the things that people fail to do time and time again is preparation, because they do not prepare for internal meetings as if they were negotiations. However, when you're looking to influence another counterparty to come to an agreement to which they may not already be in alignment with, that is absolutely a negotiation that you're going into. Now, in this example, we've got a business where the mandate is coming from finance to focus on a particular service and product area for the business, with the view that it's going to drive growth and profitability in the business, so increasing gross margin for this particular business. Now, what that may be at odds with is the recognition that the team's motivation may be this product or service that needs fulfilling and driving. However, there'll be other variables, there'll be other interests that they have that haven't been put on the table yet. And when it comes to preparing for negotiations internally, what we often don't see is, because we don't see our meetings as internal negotiations, what we're not asking ourselves are the questions around what are the interests of the other party that I'm dealing with? what are their career aspirations, and therefore are things coming down the line from different departments, different functions, different teams, because there's individuals' career aspirations and interests also at play here. So where ego and personal interests drive initiatives. What are the individuals and teams actually measured on? And where might there be constraints in the business and the system? And when we start evaluating the people on the other side of the table from us in a team meeting or an internal meeting between regions and corporate office, we're not preparing to the same degree, where we're researching exactly what's going on behind the scenes and where those interests lie. What we end up focusing on is the position that the other party has taken, and then looking to either challenge or counter that position rather than getting behind the deeper interest. So I would say first focus area, if you are looking to maximize the effectiveness of your internal meetings and negotiations, is one, start seeing meetings where you are required to be influencing your counterparties, i.e. other members of your team, either in the same region or globally, as a negotiation. Each meeting where you're looking to get stakeholder alignment and agreement is a negotiation. Two parties coming together to reach an agreement requires you to practice and leverage negotiation skills. So when you treat those meetings as a negotiation, you will need to prepare more effectively for them. You can't afford to go in half-heartedly, just hoping that you can wing your way through that dialogue without that deep preparation. If you underprepare for an external negotiation, it costs you massively. The same is true internally. So don't leave yourself exposed by underpreparing. Put preparation on the top of your list. Secondly, in order to maximize the effectiveness of internal negotiations and why they're so hard, is people fail to consider stakeholders' unique and potentially conflicting interests. Not everyone in the business is motivated to make decisions through the lens of what is for the greater good of the organization, especially if you're working for a large global corporate where the interests for each sub-region, each team can be different. And therefore, what might be good for the greater good may not be good for that individual team. It may not be good for that individual's career aspirations. So there's a whole reason and multitude of challenges that you could be facing that you're underestimating the importance of, because you're not thinking about what are the conflicting interests that I have with the stakeholders that I'm engaging in. So firstly, start looking at what are their KPIs, what are your KPIs, and where is there opportunity for tension? Because when we've got conflicting interests, usually dominated by what we're measured on, one team measured on the financials versus the effectiveness of a marketing campaign. So finance could have very different metrics for measurement of their success versus marketing around advertising campaigns and ROI on social media investment. So there are very different metrics each team will have. And what we need to understand is, when we're thinking about influencing and negotiating internally, is where are those metrics going to drive tension in the business? And are we overtly sharing that there's actually conflict of measurements so that we don't make it conflict with each other? And when we can start to surface where we're not incentivized to do the same thing, we can start to flush out where there might be challenges in our system. So, for example, if the focus is on long-term growth for the business, but the finance team are going, right, we need every sale you make to achieve a gross margin of X, it might drive short-term behavior to get that margin result, rather than where a team is focused on lifetime value of the client itself, in which case that's going to require potential investment upfront to increase the lifetime value of the customer through the services and support solutions that are offered. And when you're looking at that disconnect between both internally within finance or marketing or sales, you can start to see where the tensions are. And when you surface the tensions, you can have a more constructive dialogue about, guys, we're working for the same organization. If we pull up holistically, what are we trying to achieve here? Where is there misalignment in where we're both measured? And how can we look to create solutions that ultimately drive the business forward in a way that encourage us to pull together rather than pull apart? And that brings me on to the third point on what we need to consider is when it comes to internal negotiations, it's easy for us to let ourselves be influenced by our long-term assumptions, perceptions, and rumors about what each team is about, what the function stands for, what they're against. And sometimes we let those perceptions and judgments of the teams that we're negotiating with internally cloud our ability to actually lean in and build deeper relationships and a level of interest in our counterparties. We think we're on the same team, and we often find internally we're measured differently, and therefore there's friction and conflict. But if we've got a narrative that, finance are the, ones that stop all projects because it's all about margin, and if it doesn't hit a threshold, they're never going to approve it, without opening that dialogue to test that reality, is that absolutely true that in every case finance kills a deal? Is it absolutely true that marketing are free with their spending, and that they're not clear on how to measure effective ROI in their campaigns? Is it actually true? And what we often find ourselves doing is we can see what is happening, and what we attach to it is the meaning of what we make that activity or particular interaction mean. But the danger is if we hold on to that same narrative for years and years and years and have a fixed view of what that function is about, guess what? You create it. You create what you believe. And if you believe something, a team is adversarial, you'll create that adversarial response from them. So when you look to identify where you can create value, start looking at, have I got long-held perceptions, judgments about the counterparties that I am interacting with, the leaders that I'm negotiating with? Do I have prejudice in my mind about what they will say yes to and what they won't say yes to? And if I can allow myself to put all that prejudice and judgment to one side, can I be open to incentivizing myself and them to lean in to build relationships? Because if we can build relationships and pull away some of that noise and that nonsense of what may or may not be true, but because we're not reality testing it, we don't know, we've got to put that to one side and lean in and go, okay, how can we create more relationships which look to create value rather than destroy value? Which brings me on to the fourth point, which is why internal negotiations end up feeling more challenging than external negotiations is because people are coming at them with a zero-sum mindset. Okay, zero-sum mindset means that it's a win-lose scenario. If I give you approval to spend that money, then technically I'm losing because I've had to say yes to something I didn't want to. So we're at odds with each other. If finance approves something, great. It feels like finance has capitulated rather than actually facilitated value to be created in the deal. So we need to move away from a mindset of us versus them. How can we create a mindset of we and collaborate for us as a team, as a business, to drive value creation? Because when we think about how we approach external negotiations, we expect our counterparty on an external negotiation to have different views. We expect them to want to obviously maximize the deal in their terms. But if we're looking to build long-term relationships, we are not going to treat that situation as a win-lose scenario, because if we did, we would never get to do a deal with them again. And likely they wouldn't renege on any deal they felt under duress to agree to, and then you'll never get the opportunity to have another dialogue and do business together. So when you think about external negotiations where we've got different interests, we can't operate in a zero-sum mindset, because we've got to create win-win value creating solutions. But why don't we apply that same mindset and thinking to internal negotiations, where rather than it be win-lose, if I get this budget or I don't get this budget, then there's a win-lose scenario for the business. How can we encourage ourselves to look for opportunities to collaborate and create value? And the reason why this is even more important internally than externally is because guess what? You don't get activate BATNA in an internal negotiation, BATNA being your best alternative to the negotiated agreement. There aren't really very many options of going to an external finance team and getting them to approve your spend when you're working internally. You're going to need to work with the team that you've got. There are limited options, which can then ultimately create this power imbalance internally. And what we have to recognize is that power imbalance can shift behavior to be value distributive or value creative. And if you want to succeed, is building your skill set in collaboration strategies and finding ways to invest in your discipline around techniques on how to build relationships and get people working together collaborative to find value, to look for opportunities to create, then you will be far more effective. So recognize that there's always going to be friction. You know, sales and marketing have historically always had friction. Finance and sales will have friction. Each party is measured differently, but start to get curious, get underneath the skin of that, and leverage your negotiation skills as you would externally in preparation, in considering the areas where you would have conflicting interests and surfacing them. Letting go of your judgment and your perceptions of the other party, and look for how you can reality test what's actually real and what's going to drive you forward. And finally, let go of that zero-sum mindset view and focus on how you can create infinite possibilities by being open to value creation. Thanks so much for listening. I've run 2 minutes over my 15-minute negotiation nugget today. Please forgive me. Please forgive this flickering light today, and have a fabulous week. And I look forward to sharing more value from the Value Negotiator next week. Take care.